Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park and have been made possible in part by Ravinia Festival, CJE, Senior Life, GAN Music and Sound.
And welcome to Cahnmann's Current Events Roundtable. Today we have a wonderful guest, somebody that I've been trying to get on the show and thinking about it for a while, and it is Dr. David Hacker, who's a PhD in chemical engineering, and we're going to be talking and discussing the pros and cons of fracking, and we're also going to be talking about the Keystone Pipeline. And there's a lot of stuff, David, and welcome to our show. Thank you for coming. Thank you again. I'll tell you a little bit about Dr. Hacker. He is a chemical engineer. He started out at Northwestern. He got his PhD there. He worked at General Electric in gas turbine division in the research capacity. He was senior research scientist at IIT at the Research Institute. He was a supervisor for combustion research at the Institute of Gas and Technology, and he was a U of I professor of chemical engineering, senior researcher for Amoco Chemical. Oh my God, you have a great resume. And today we need it more than ever because we're going to prove or disprove some of the stuff that's been going on about fracking and about the Keystone Pipeline. And one of the things about fracking that I'd like to start off with, does fracking cause earthquakes? According to this article that I read, and I know you're not an earthquake specialist, but because of your scientific knowledge about what's real and what's not real, I'm going to talk about a little bit about how scientifically earthquakes have been, because of the drilling of the wastewater, the fluids used in fracking, and it's deposed and injected into the disposal wells underground. This is generally regarded as the safest, most cost-efficient way of getting rid of it. But in some parts of the country, especially in the Barnett Shale area around Dallas, Fort Worth, it has been causing earthquakes. And they're getting, both number is getting stronger and in strength. So David, you don't have to look at your notes, and because I think you really have the greatest knowledge of earthquakes. So what is, as far as what's real and what's not real, and why they're saying this, what really is this all about?
I think what's occurred is that there's a misperception of what earthquakes really are about. In the issue related to the earthquakes that occurred in Oklahoma, the measurement of earthquake is the intensity of the tremor. As a result, we have what is called a Richter scale. A Richter scale gives you intensity and a logarithmic scale. So, for example, the most intense earthquakes that we have seen have been the Richter scale, the order of 6, 7, 8, and 9, generally. And one of the last in California, I think, was registered around 7. The earthquake that has been essentially regarded as an earthquake, if I question that, has been a tremor that has occurred, which is the order of about 3. What does 3 mean? It means that it's an imperceptible tremor. There is a tremor, and indeed they did see that the building shook. There is no catastrophic effect of this kind of tremor.
So how do
frankly.
they relate it to the drilling of the, of fracking? Why do they see it as part of the same thing, that fracking causes earthquakes?
Well, it causes tremors. I don't know if it causes earthquakes. I think we have to decide what an earthquake is all about. An earthquake occurs when the plates, the tectonic plates are moved, and the order of energy required there is an enormous amount of energy as compared to what we might indeed obtain from any kind of fracking effect. There has been a report in Holland. There have been what they call earthquakes. These, when looked at more carefully, one finds that they are a result of shifting, essentially a shifting platelets below the ground, and have nothing to do with earthquakes. Holland is built on a porous surface, from what I understand, and apparently attributed to what has occurred in northern Norway, where there has been a melting of the Permian ice flow, which essentially has changed the stability of the land. As a result, one perceives, at least in Holland, which is all connected, that the land is dropping, generally. It has nothing to do with fracking.
So it's environmentally, it's happening on its own. And if there was no fracking, it would still happen. That's what you're saying.
No, it would still happen.
So why are they blaming everything on fracking right now?
Why? Because there is a perception, whether it be political or otherwise, that there are groups of people who apparently are insistent that fracking is not the way to go. They feel that there is an environmental consequence of fracking, whether it be a result of people saying, not in my backyard, because right now most of the shells that we're talking about where the drilling occurs are in areas like New York State, North Dakota, Arizona, places like that, that were pretty pristine. We don't want that to occur in our neighborhood. Unfortunately.
In fact, a judge in Illinois, he just said that in southern Illinois, he struck down a move that would have prevented the start of fracking in Illinois. So, which was good. That means that we possibly can start fracking in our own state.
Well, there are regulations, and I think that if the issue is of regulations of adequate and care that are given to drilling, I don't see any reason why one should object to it. However, I'm not going to convince those who are in the opposition that we ought not to do it. This has become an issue, I think, that is purely political. I think that the environmentalist movement essentially has decided that we don't want to have fossil fuels, and anything that in any way is connected with fossil fuel recovery is in error. And as a result, you can extend that to say, well, of course, therefore we ought to have A, B, C, and D, which are all connected. We don't want the Keystone Pipeline because it's going to deliver a fossil fuel between Canada and, let's say, Houston.
And it's dirty.
The question of dirty is not the issue. The issue is oil is dirty, period. If you think that it produces soot, yes, that's why it's dirty. It's not dirty because of any other reason. It's a natural formation of fossil fuel below the ground that we have been dealing with for the past several centuries.
Yeah, because they talk about the pipeline, that they don't want the Keystone Pipeline, but we've had, and we still have, many pipelines that are going through. So why is the Keystone any different than the other pipelines?
Because that's the most recent development. Those of us who have seen oil spills and all kinds of other, quote, tragedies that have occurred as a result of the energy industry, clearly are going to be convinced that any new innovation, like the Keystone Pipeline, is going to be a danger to the environment. I dare say I don't find that to be the case. I think that the evaluation made by the State Department recently has been that it's okay, let's go ahead with it. We have done that a while ago. As far as alternative routes it will be delivered anyway, whether we have the pipeline or not. Nevertheless, there are some advantages of the pipeline over, for example, rail transportation. I think the biggest issue now has been the failure of rail cars, namely the spills that have occurred as a result in Canada, for example, and one on the East Coast, where the train has been derailed and fuels that are fairly volatile have been spilled and caused catastrophe.
That to me sounds like a lot worse, having railroad cars, and they have to have these pipelines, so there are long pipelines on these rail cars that are going into all these cities that are causing pile up of cars waiting for the rail to leave. Do you ever sit at a railroad train waiting for railroads to,
Well,
you sit there for like a half an hour.
We have unit trains now that deliver all kinds of commodities.
So,
and oil is one of them.
Mm-hmm. So to me, it sounds like a pipeline that we don't have to see, that's buried in the ground. It, to me, would be more efficient, and it would also make a lot more jobs for people, too, coming into, especially in Canada. Remember, Canada is our neighbors, and it would make jobs for the people. They're always talking about not enough jobs here in the United States. This would give people jobs. It would, and also whatever they send through, and a lot of people say, oh, it's going to other foreign countries. We'll get something from that as well. One hand washes the other.
Well, I mean, if you take that position, you simply have a bias because you're in favor of increased use of either fossil fuels. You must be. I can't put out of my mind the fact that the opposition has always a point. It can make a valuable point understood by the rest of the population. And much of this comes as a result of misunderstanding.
So you're a scientist. And one of the reasons I brought you on the show is because you're a chemical engineer. You're not a media host that just gets their information from their own little bit of research. And I mean, as far as myself, I had to do my own research, but I thought, hey, why don't I get the best on my show? And I found David Hacker. So
thank you very much.
And so now we are going to dispute or agree with some of these environmentalists.
The reason you have opposition is because perceptions people have of events differ. They have their biases, whatever goes on. I mean, I can't contest the fact that the environmentalists are totally wrong. They have an issue. However, they exaggerate the issue, and in my, at least, understanding of the system, that the exaggeration is far-fetched. That indeed there are some advantages. Look, are we trying, if the main reason we're trying to eliminate the Keystone Pipeline or any other source of fossil fuel delivery is because we oppose fossil fuels, that issue is an environmental issue that clearly has been the direction that it has gone. I mean, after all, Al Gore has already said, let's wipe out all kinds of fossil fuels by the year 2050. That's not going to happen. There are alternative routes, and his solutions to this are total elimination of fossil fuels.
And what does he propose?
What is he proposing? Solar energy and wind energy, which in my mind are elusive, they're unrealistic, and they will never supplant the energy levels that we had demanded of our industrial societies. That's a problem. Now, if people believe that and are really convinced that because they are not non-fossil fuel dependent, that they are better, that may well be the case. But when you look realistically at solar energy, you come up with an observation that one, the method of converting solar power, namely the sun's light, into electrical energy requires one of two things. Either you can collect the heat that is radiated from the sun in a panel, which requires enormous amount of land. Are we willing to do that? with panels,
And
okay?
but that, I can understand that going on in Florida or a warm climate. How do they do it in a climate like ours, like Chicago?
Precisely, that is the issue. The issue, it is localized. Solar energy can only be really seriously accomplished in areas that are reasonably arid. Okay, and so we know where it is. It's the Southwest. It's maybe in Florida, but other than that, the rest of the country is not particularly suited to recovery of solar energy. Okay. Moreover, the other fact is that solar energy is collected also by what is called a photoelectric cell. This was a discovery that Albert Einstein got the Nobel Prize for, namely the photoelectric effect. Namely, if you shine light on a surface of a material that is essentially what I'd call an electrical device, a device of metal, that, in other words, when light hits it, it creates an electric charge. At the present time, we are working on all kinds of devices that are called photoelectric cells to improve the recovery of solar energy. At the present time, we are able to, at least in the best we have right now, and there's a lot of research going on, the best we have is about 30% of the conversion. That's not very good when you consider alternative sources like fossil fuel, which is nearly 80 to 90%.
Yeah, because we have to heat our house. It isn't just about oil for our cars. We have to heat our houses. I mean, there's hospitals. I mean, schools. I mean, there's so many different reasons why we use that. And, you know, also, you know, we always talk about fracking, and a lot of our viewers may not know what exactly is fracking. Let's go back to fracking and what fracking is and what it produces.
Well, what is fracking? Fracking essentially is let me put it this way. You have to have the resource available. What is a resource? A resource is a shale, which is fairly porous, which contains natural gas or oil.
Now, do most states have shale?
No, they don't. There are selective areas where there are predominantly what are called suitable shale deposits.
And Illinois has shale.
Illinois is a coal-producing state, remember, and so southern Illinois probably has an enormous quantity of what I call gas and oil in the coal area.
See, we're lucky. Everybody wants to go to Florida, they want to go to California, and here we got our resources. You know, it isn't so bad that we live in a cold climate. We got a lot of the best resources.
Oh, but you asked what are the places. So North Dakota, right now, we've seen the Bakken Shelf, the Marcellus Shelf in New York State and Pennsylvania. But these were, remember, those areas were always oil-producing states. Pennsylvania is where they first discovered the first oil well.
See, in those states right now, the Governor Como, he wants to not allow fracking in his state, which has a lot of shale, and the other state that you just talked about, Oklahoma, was it?
Oklahoma.
Yeah, they're trying. The governor is for that, and he's trying to go on his own, and the president right now is trying to veto it in Congress.
Well, you know,
Which
this
I
is
don't
why this has
understand,
become such a political issue. It's a hot political issue. It's not going to be easy to resolve.
It's unfortunately has become political. It shouldn't be political. It should be not. It should be something because we need it. It has nothing to do with politics, and it's unfortunate.
It does have. You're wrong. It has to do with politics. That's the real reason we are fighting this issue.
No, I mean, I understand it has to do with politics, but it shouldn't have anything to do with politics.
Well, you're right. It shouldn't. But that's idealistically thinking. Let's face it. Politics runs the country.
Unfortunately. That's why I said this should not have anything to do with politics, but it does, unfortunately.
But let's get back to the issue of, you know, we talked about solar energy and what the limitations of solar energy are. Moreover, the sun doesn't shine all the time. The second thing is wind power. That has been, we have devoted a tremendous amount of money in terms of national treasure to wind power development. What is wind power?
Is that the one? Is that the one with
the big windmills?
But
okay.
what about the birds? Don't they get?
Well, that's a minor issue.
Yeah, because
Those
I know
are all
we lose a lot of birds.
consequences.
We lose a lot of birds.
Well, it's a consequence that you're going to have to face in anything you do. You have the upside and the downside.
Okay.
Okay? Let's be honest. When you think of any issue, we can always think of the negative aspects of that issue. As I'm thinking, for example, of wind power. Why is that not the most likely prospect for success in delivering the quantities of energy required? Because the wind doesn't blow all the time.
I see. It's sort of like the sun doesn't shine
That's
in certain
correct.
states,
So you're
and the wind doesn't blow. Maybe in Chicago we could get a lot of wind power because they talk about we're the windy city.
May I interrupt? And let me ask the question, though. What is required of an energy system? Reliability, constancy. You want to know when you put your plug into your socket in your house that something comes out, namely electricity. You don't want to have a brownout. Now, when you have intermittent devices, intermittent sources, the serious question is, can it deliver reliably the energy you want? Moreover, do you have a way, if you are able to deliver it at a particular period of time, are you able to store it? How do you store it? We don't have the methods yet of suitably storing that kind of energy. You need large capacitors in order to do that.
So does fracking help?
Well, let's
we
haven't said much about
we
fracking.
Only have 10 more minutes.
We got 10 minutes and I haven't gotten to the point. We ought to have a subsequent lecture on this.
See?
Okay, fracking, what is fracking doing? It's an intermittent result. Okay. We have discovered that we can get enormous quantities of natural gas as a result of pressurizing and cracking this shale deposit that I spoke of earlier. Fracking, that's what fracking is about. It's a fracture of the shale deposit releasing its pores and releasing the gas that's contained in those pores or the oil. And we have been doing this since 1980.
And we do it with water, lots of water
and sand. Right now, to do that, how do you crack an underground porous material? By introducing a pressurized system. Now, how do you pressurize it? What is the best way to do it? Why do you use water? Why don't we use something else?
The new one is coming in as
Well, we're
propane.
talking about it. We're talking about all kinds of things. The problem is water has advantages. Water is what is called incompressible. In other words, I can press on it and nothing happens to the water. It doesn't get denser. It gets to a limited value of density, and that means that if you use that as a pressurizing device, it's like using a piston.
And it's a little bit safer than propane,
and it's safe.
Because propane could cause
Propane,
fires.
on the other hand, is compressible. That means you need more pressure in order to achieve the same levels of pressure level in that fracking process. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, it may be an alternative, but it's not a very likely one. Moreover, you got to collect propane. Propane is not a freebie. Water is a more likely freebie right now.
And they can use, and again, they can reuse the water too.
It's recycled
It's recyclable.
Water. It's very expensive. Most of the drilling companies are aware of the price of water and are trying to reduce the cost. As a result, what have they looked at? They've looked at recovery of water, and that is a critical factor to reduce the cost of the operation. One of the things that's important in any drilling operation is to reduce costs. Reduce costs constantly. That's an economic consideration. Now, what we have to do then, right now, and the reason people dislike it, because natural gas essentially is a fossil fuel. Now, one of the advantages of natural gas over, let's say, oil is that it can reduce the quantity of CO2 produced by about half. Now, that's an important consideration if you're trying at the same time to understand the nature of global warming and what the consequences of greenhouse gases are.
So, David, why is there an objection? It sounds so positive the way you're explaining it, and yet our president doesn't want to sign. He said he will veto it, and one of the senators.
I doubt whether he will be able to overcome the veto on this, because there are many Democratic senators now from the Midwest and from the far West who are considerably
right.
supportive of the Keystone Pipeline. So I don't think I can think that the Congress will override his veto of the attempts
That would be
to
on
do
the
it.
Keystone,
And
but
I
they
think
also
it would be a foolish political move.
And then they want to be, that would be on the Keystone, he wants to do that. And on the other one, the Governor Cuomo wants to veto this.
He has done it. There is now a ban on fracking in New York State.
So he's already.
He's done that.
Yes.
Okay. So what I can say about that is he will
That's
bear
so
the responsibility of Western New York, which now has a 10% unemployment rate.
See, he has vetoed that, and the president wants to veto the other, and both of them, it looks like, you know, first of all, we don't want to be dependent on oil from the Middle East. Right now, I think they're threatened. That's probably why all the gas has gone down to a couple of dollars plus a gallon.
There's only one reason the price of gas has gone down, is because there's a fundamental law in economics called the law of supply and demand. When the supply reaches proportions that no longer people want to buy it, the price will drop. This is a natural consequence of supply.
So
that's my view.
Is that one of the reasons they say we have now enough, and they don't want to build the pipeline, they don't want the fracking because we don't need.
Because companies are beginning to reconsider how much drilling they ought to do. But what I just saw today in the paper is that, you know, many of the oil companies have decided, let's go ahead with it. We're not going to reduce our drilling capability. We're going to continue to do it. It may drop the price.
Right, because we can't be dependent. We can't be that the price is going to stay at $2 plus a gallon. We saw it go up to $4 and $5 not that long ago. So you can't trust it.
Fundamentally, we believe there are certain economic laws that apply, and that is the law of supply and demand.
See,
and
so
if we don't want to buy that, then we have other reasons.
Yeah, so that is why I think it's very important to have another way of getting all this, because, you know, we think because it's down, oh, well, what do we don't need it anymore, but we're going to need it. It's not going to last forever.
Let me summarize something. I think there are certain summarizing in what we've just been discussing is why
we have 2 minutes, David.
We got 2 minutes to summary.
Yes.
I will say, one, economically, it's favorable to continue to frack, because of whatever we can think of jobs, opportunities, and increased income that has come about as a result.